Now, earlier today, I had the pleasure of hosting a session looking at the world of trust and the importance it plays in payments. And the security word was mentioned rather more than once during that session. And it's therefore very apt we move now to a session looking at payment security, really looking all around the world, what's being done, how the industry is doing. And I'm pleased to welcome a number of true industry professionals to the stage here for the show. First up, I'd like to invite Alexis Bartelds, who is the co-founder of SAM Media. Alexis, nice to have you with me. Hi.
Hi, James. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Fully on brand. You have the world global map and you've got SAM Media. Fantastic. Great that you could join us. And what, if you just tell us quickly, what does SAM Media do? What do you do? And why did you create SAM Media? What was the aim?
Well, the aim is to sell fantastic content to consumers worldwide, and also to create challenging and exciting jobs for people that we love to work with.
That's a very, very short, very good, very sweet answer. Thank you, Alexis. And next up, invite John Bruner, who's the president and CEO of Aegis Mobile.
Good morning.
Good. Why? It's good afternoon here, but good morning to you, John. Why?
Yeah, a little early here.
I know, but thank you for joining at this early hour. So, John, introduce yourself and Aegis Mobile. What do you do?
Sure. Okay, you just introduced me. So Aegis Mobile came about to provide compliance services and fraud protection in the premium SMS industry about 13, 14 years ago, and has evolved from there into direct carrier billing, location services, identity platforms, just many different carrier channels to protect consumers for the carrier ecosystem.
Fantastic. Thank you, John. Next up, I'd like to introduce Brian Pettit, co-founder and CTO with MCP Insight. Brian, good to have you on the show. Hi.
Hi, James. How's it going?
Yeah, all good. It was great speaking with your colleague, Toby, early on my previous session. So nice to round it off with you as well from the more the technical side of things and the security side. So great having you. For those who weren't able to catch the early version, we've got quite a bit of feedback if people can hear it. Thank you very much. And yeah, perfect now. So Brian, for those people who weren't on previous sessions and didn't hear what MCP Insight does, can you let people know what do you do, MCP Insight? What's your essence of being?
Well, we started as a compliance company for carriers to ensure that DCB and VAS transactions were clean and would not generate much by way of complaints. So that includes pre, during, and post-transaction controls, and also onboarding services for new services. We have a few other products as well. One is MCP Shield, which is a fraud blocking product. We have the MCP Scanner, which scans in about 28 different countries' ad flows. And then we have real-time fraud testing teams operating in about 15 countries. So we would have manual testing for finding fraud.
Okay. Perfect. So very, very apt to have you and your company on the panel. So thank you for joining. Next up, I'd like to invite David Rennie, who is the Digital Identity Platform Services owner with IDEMIA.
Hi there, James. Thanks for having me.
Hi, David. No, great to see you. So for those people who don't know who IDEMIA is, go for it. Tell us, who are you?
So IDEMIA is a B2B identity services company and biometrics company. So we are, probably everybody has an IDEMIA product somewhere about them. So if you look on the back of your debit card, you will find, you'll find in very small print the words for IDEMIA on there. We deliver SIM cards, but we also do passport issuance for governments and identity services. For example, in India, which is the world's largest identity scheme, the Aadhaar scheme, so 1.2 billion people enrolled in that scheme. So IDEMIA provides the technology behind that service.
I have no idea. And you yourself have an interesting background, I know. I think I'll be calling on that background during this session, no doubt. And I'm sure you get asked about it quite a few times because you did extensive work with the British government before in exactly this area. So
I thought we were going to be leaving it in an enigmatic way. But yes, I worked for government on the identity card program and then through to gov.uk Verify.
Yeah, no, you know how British people love identity cards, but there we go. Anyway, moving swiftly on. I'd like to introduce Christoforos Papachristou, Strategic Account Manager with, well, the full name is CENSUS Labs SA, I think, Christoforos. But good to have you. And you're on mute. You're doing my usual thing. There you go.
I didn't do it yesterday. It's my day today to do it. So hello, nice to have you again in the panel.
No problem. Yep. So Christoforos was a contestant on my last panel of the day yesterday, the jury, and he did very, very well. He was pipped at the post, but he nearly got there. But really, really good showing, and great to have you here. Just explain, what does CENSUS do? What do you specialize in as well yourself?
So we are a security assessment provider, and through cutting-edge IT and OT operation technology, security research, we are offering state-of-the-art security assessment services to organizations worldwide, both for the infrastructure through red team security assessments, penetration testing, but also for the products, so source code audits, secure software development lifecycle, web mobile application, and device security assessments.
Fantastic. I know you've got some very well-known financial services clients as well, so very well placed to talk about what we're going to be introducing here. And last but by no means least, it's someone you've already seen twice today, but 3 times a charm. David Lotfi, the founder and CEO of EVINA. David, hi.
Hi, James. Hi, everyone.
I know you've done this twice already today, but there may be some people who've joined this session who have not seen you before, don't know who EVINA is and what you do, and just explain that in a few words. Thank you.
Yeah, EVINA is a cybersecurity company specialized in protecting mobile payments through anti-fraud solutions, and I'm the founder of this company.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Now, I'm going to start the session off as if you've been watching what I've been doing today and probably yesterday as well. I'm just going to start by asking each of you how you think the industry as a whole, so that's all stakeholders, are doing at keeping payments secure. And I'm talking from a global perspective. So a rating from 1 to 10, 1 being they're doing absolutely nothing, it's just 100% fraud, to 10, the world's perfect, and I'm wearing my pink sunglasses and I'm kicking back with a cocktail in my hand because there's nothing to do. So with that rating 1 to 10, I'd like to start off with you, Alexis. Where do you think the industry is today in terms of securing payments?
I would rate it a 6 on a scale of 10.
Okay, fairly down the middle. So on my previous session, we started with a 5, which gave plenty of room for growth. But 6, that's a good.
The positive news is that I think it's improving tremendously over the past 2 years, but there's still a lot of work to do.
Okay, that's a firm 6 from Alexis. Brian, what's your take on it? Because I know you've got a bit of a global view as well with your 28 countries. A 4. Wow. Do you like to explain that a little bit?
There's a lot more to do.
There's an awful lot more to do.
Good progress so far this year, I have to say, but there's an awful lot more to do.
Well, okay, we'll dig into that a bit later. David, the same to you.
Well, just as a counterpoint. Oh, sorry, wrong David.
That's no problem. This is David here.
Identity issue. I just as a counterpoint, I will go with 8 out of 10. I think the majority of payments get to their chosen destination, so that must be a positive score. Okay,
so that's a positive. But you're not just going the other side of it just because you really think it's an 8.
Well, if you think about the economic value that's being created in the world and the demise of poverty around the world. The world is improving. There's an awful lot more to do, as has been previously said, but ultimately we're making progress.
Okay, so we've got an 8 from David. Christoforos, over to you, your position.
Yeah, if you were asking me last year about it, I would probably say 6, but this year I would say 5. I think that we are progressing, but we are progressing much slower than the fraudsters. So there are a lot of things to do, and I don't think that the maturity of the industry follows the speed that it had to follow.
Okay, thank you, Christoforos. It's very, very clear. John, over with you in the US.
So look, I think the fraudsters are always well funded, so they always stay a step ahead of the technologies used to prevent them. But generally, I would say some of the mobile payment channels are more secure than others. So I'm going to be right around a 6. But I would say that in any channel, even a 1% of fraud as a count of transactions can bring an industry down or shut it down. So a lot of work to do.
You can, because you just look at, for example, the world of SMS and what's going on here in the UK. I had a session about that yesterday, all about looking at SMS usage in two-factor authentication. And here in the UK, it's getting a lot of press. Any fraud related to SMS text messaging is getting a huge amount of press. It didn't, frankly, get last year or the year before. So that does have a bearing on the situation. And David, your take on it?
If we take a look at the innovators, those who lead the industry, and if we just take a look at the DCB for Growth working group activity as well, we can really see that the leaders have taken the subject seriously and they are leading a path. So if we take a look at the strongest and the biggest players, we are at 7 on 10. But if we take a look at the global overall business, and that's how I should be aligned with Alexis, with Brian. If we take a look at the whole traffic and the whole business, which is huge, the awareness and the insights have not come to them yet. And that's what we're struggling to do with the MEF working group, what we're struggling to do with you, to bring awareness and insights so that more and more people get protected and that the global traffic can be protected. But the industry, the leader of the industry, those who make what will be the future today, start to be very well informed.
Okay, thank you.
If you might add to this, James, to what David said and Christoforos.
No, please come in. It was to you next anyway, so please jump in.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, because I think they got a very good point, and also John mentioning that it varies very much per payment method, which is very true, I think. But the problem is not only that there's no solutions available. I think it all starts with ourselves. All the stakeholders, all the players in the value chain every morning need to look in the mirror, not only whether their hair looks fine, but to really answer the question, do you want to take action? Do you want to take responsibility? Because it's not only about solutions. Solutions are there, and of course, fraudsters will always be a step ahead, well-funded, etc., smart. But if all of us in the value chain would do everything we could, there would be a lot less fraud. So sometimes unwillingly, players in the value chain facilitate or tolerate fraud, sometimes willingly, and those things we need to change. And that requires all of us in the value chain to work together on this.
That is a point I was about to raise. It requires everyone to work together. But Brian, coming to you on the MCP Insight side of things, of all the stakeholders out there, what type of stakeholder do you think has the most work to do or needs to, let's say, get a little bit more motivated to help protect payments for the consumer?
Well, it goes across aggregators and on operators. I think they still have the most work to do.
Okay, and what do you think is lacking from their side? Why do you think it's lacking in terms of motivation? Is it just because it's just plain hard work and it costs a lot of money, or what other factors do you think?
I think it is a lot of hard work, and it's also we don't bear good news. I heard Jeff saying that on another call previously. We don't bring good news. We bring bad news, and a lot of the time they just it's a very negative thing for them to tell them that X percentage of their traffic is very, very poor. But they are improving. That's why I say 4 is there is room for improvement, and they are making improvements.
Okay, so fantastic. Christoforos, over to you. Well, what's your take on that exact same point from your experience with your clients? Because we, for example, within MEF, it's more on the SMS side of things, but we've got a working group looking specifically at banking fraud in South Africa. So we have the banks, we have the regulator, we have the mobile operators, and getting everyone to work together is the absolute key to success at stamping out fraud. But some are better than others at working together. What's your take on it, Christoforos?
Well, I'm coming from a different background because most of the work was done in the defense and the intelligence agencies. So it was always a race to work all together and bring the results. And we want to do it, but you have so many burdens in order to do it. And I think fora like MEF could be the right vehicle to achieve that and have this. I believe everyone has a big part to play, and also there is a big need for training for each one of them, and also the consumers. It's not only the providers, it's not just a technology, a technology problem, but it's a lot of the insider threat, a lot of people that they don't know how to use it, and they always tend to get the easier solution. Well, you cannot blame them, of course, for taking the most easy solution, but we need to be sure that they are safe on what they are doing. So we've seen the last year a lot of SIM duplication, SIM rerouting, phishing attacks, and a lot of two-factor authentication not being enough. I think that there is a transition in the industry, but technology is not solely the solution. Training is something that we need to take into consideration quite a lot.
Okay, thank you, Christoforos. David, over to you. Now, what about the regulation side of things? We've got a session coming up very soon looking at the whole regulatory environment around payments. But where does this regulatory environment sit within the security side of things from your perspective?
Well, I would come at this from an identity perspective. So the biggest challenge for payments ultimately is who is in control of the account, and establishing who that is at the outset of the creation of the account, and then ongoing who is continuing to control the account. And the trust issues that we have seen described today all stem from the ability or inability of the user to have confidence and trust in who the party is that they're connecting with. And as we use digital transactions and digital media more and more frequently, understanding identity and identity ecosystems becomes ever more important. So governments are now understanding this. There's been great progress through the Financial Action Task Force. So that's the OECD forum that has been looking at how digital identity should be defined and articulated in regulation, how that filters down through anti-money laundering regulations. And governments have also been developing standards, because at the moment the financial world works on a risk-based approach. So that really leaves it very much up to the financial institution to establish what the risks are and how they should mitigate those risks through identity verification. We're beginning to see a change in that, with the emergence of standards at a European level, UK level, and in North America and elsewhere. And once we can establish standards for identity verification, it becomes much easier for the ecosystem to comply with those standards and adopt the technologies that will ensure those standards are implemented.
Okay, thank you. John, over to you, because we brought you in for the US perspective.
Sorry.
It's okay, we've got you. Just listen to what I ask, no problem at all. And something that keeps coming up again and again, I just find mind-blowing, is that California on its own, if it was a country, would be the 5th largest economy in the world. So the amount of payment action you've got going on in the US is absolutely fearsome. What's the situation in the US vis-a-vis, for example, what's going on in Europe with regards to security? Are you behind the curve? Are you ahead of the curve? What's your take on it?
Well, I guess from a regulatory perspective, if I can start there, we haven't created any new laws, but we are continuing to use existing laws and regulations on anti-competitive behavior, anti-money laundering, financing of terrorism, and consumer protection. In terms of where my expertise lies is in direct carrier billing, which came out of the shutdown of premium SMS in January of 2014 in the U.S. Market. Consent decrees were agreed to between the 4 major carriers at that time, which would include Sprint, of how carriers would operate going forward with third-party billing and would be responsible to the FCC on a quarterly basis. And so there were a number of rules that were implemented to operate direct carrier billing in the U.S. market. Specifically, a senior officer would be identified as being the person responsible for all of reporting, communications, and help to the government. There is quarterly reporting of all claims for refunds. Carriers have to retain evidence of the consent, express informed consent, or 2FA. So there's a lot of requirements when making a purchase. The carriers are required to notify the phone number that made the purchase with a message confirming that it was made, separate from the actual consent to purchase. So there are a lot of rules that are put in place. And really what compliance in the U.S. for direct carrier billing has become is providing compliance operation services to ensure that all of these mandates are met, which has significantly driven down the issues around direct carrier billing that we see in other countries that we operate in. But at the same time, it's also created a hesitancy to expand the market and be aggressive in that market when it's such a very efficient and effective channel. Things like, using your phone number for your children to buy apps and games as opposed to your credit card, even if it's hidden behind an account, has much less risk on the up end. And so while the regulatory oversight that's very significant has created more safety for consumers, it's really had an impact on the growth of the industry overall.
Okay, so would you say that there's been, from that perspective, there's been more success on the US side of things than over this side, or where would you sit on that?
I think that from a direct carrier billing, we're seeing a lot of success here. What's interesting too, though, is, and I'll go off of what was just said before me, is that trusted identity is also key, moving forward. And the U.S. is pushing for shake and stir, which is identified callers to prevent robocalling. But also the U.S. has implemented their 10DLC platforms with a few of the major carriers to have verified senders, trusted, ID for senders. And so, we're trying to get rid of the phishing and the spam by requiring, for example, business to consumer messaging. You've got to register as a company, be verified, have a background check, right? Get a risk score and determine what kind of throughput you're going to get.
Yeah, I have to admit that the US with its usshortcodes.com scheme for so many years, and now with your 10 DLC, that is really, really helping drive them forward.
Shake and Stir is going to do the same thing, right? It's verified sender, verified caller. So, those are really relevant too when you look at some of the ecosystem around mobile payments and using those channels to help with verification. But really, it's about trusted identity and being able to do high volume trusted identity, especially since we've gone from brick and mortar purchase where you know who you're buying from to online. And so getting those verified merchants out there through the entire ecosystem is critical, in my opinion.
Fantastic. Now, bringing in Alexis here. So from your perspective, and I'll open this out to everyone else with the same question, essentially, what were the key factors that you think, it's not the key physical factors it could be, and what mindsets do you really need, does an organization really need to have to really set about reducing payments fraud and building that trust consumers need in mobile payments in particular?
Yeah, well, then I go back to what I said earlier, and it's really that all of us need to be willing to do something about it. And like David said, I think the leaders in the industry at the forefront, they are taking the right actions. Increasingly, very much agree with what Brian said, operators and payment providers, they are in a key position to do something about it. And again, some of them, they tolerate, unwillingly facilitate fraud, where actually they could do more about it. Sometimes it's a matter of resources, sometimes it's a matter of knowledge. So there's a lot of education, if you want, mission work to do, to share the knowledge and to show examples and show use cases. It's also partly understandable because the first reaction often of carriers to issues of problematic traffic, problematic transactions and complaints is to make the flow more complex, to make the payment process more difficult for the consumer. But as we have seen also in the MEF survey presented earlier today, is that what drives mobile payment and what consumers love about it is it's fast and convenient. So if we take away those advantages, those benefits of mobile payment, then the adoption will slow down and users are less likely to use it. And so it's important we keep those in place. And the better we have the security managed, the more seamless, the more frictionless the process can be. And in the end, that will result in better quality for everyone. So yeah, these key stakeholders need to work together and take action, understand what they can do to reduce fraud. So that's a mindset, but it's also knowledge. And often it can help to do a case study, to come in together, a security provider together with a merchant like some media, and then show a carrier or show a payment provider the data, show it can be done. And there can be a seamless process, a frictionless process for the consumer to pay, at the same time generating very profitable revenue. So initially, often making the flow more complex, you see a drop in revenues. Of course, some carriers are a bit worried about that. Some people miss their targets, the same in payment providers. But in the long term, mid and long term, and it is sooner than they think, revenues will start to increase again. And that's very much possible. So it's an opportunity. Taking fraud more serious, taking security more serious is an opportunity.
Okay, so it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you don't do anything about it, fraud will get worse, your revenues will go down, and essentially you give up the ghost and you don't want to go further. But making that investment in fraud will help grow your channel. So that seems to be what Alexis is saying, so it makes sense. Now over to you, Brian, at MCP Insights. 2021 has been, or put it this way, the back end of 2020, 2021 has been a little different to previous years. What are you seeing new in the world of fraud that's impacted security this year in particular?
Okay, so just to follow up on Alexis' point there, the other positive for the operators, because I've been a bit negative, is that with fraud, people tend to throw away once they're in a subscription loop, they throw away their SIM card and typically they will go with an opposing operator. So that is a good news story for the operators in terms of stopping the fraud. So generally, we are seeing three pieces of good news in that if we look at South Africa in particular and compare January to, let's say, this month, we're seeing the complexity of the fraud increasing 12-fold. The complexity of it. So the simple, silly, stupid fraud is no longer being presented anymore, and the volumes are dropping. And that is good news. So that also leads on to the fact that the big paydays seem to be disappearing this year as well. So we're getting more and more fraud with user intervention, which is, a hacker in India grabs control of a phone in Saudi Arabia and manually intervenes and subscribes to services. But this is now getting less and less attractive to the fraudsters. So the market overall is getting less and less attractive. And the final one that we're seeing is this reduction in surge traffic, which we saw huge amounts of it a number of years ago, in particular in India. It's now dropping down to low and slow traffic.
Brian, for the uninitiated, what is surge traffic?
Well, that would be where we would get hit with 10,000 subscription requests.
Oh, okay. So, yeah.
That's surge traffic. And
right.
It's a model which we saw a lot of. It's basically get in and out fast, get paid within 7 days, and before anybody finds out what's going on, I'd be ahead of the complaints. So that's, I presume David will agree with me on this one, that is dropping off considerably, but it is now more low and slow. And it's more difficult to find, much more sophisticated. But I think there are diminishing marginal returns for fraudsters. So in other words, it is less attractive. So I'm predicting that they will disappear more. One note of warning is the three major app stores, the pin hacks that are going on there. We're getting complaints from two of the large operators in Middle East on the three main app stores that their pin loops have been hacked. And we know there are affiliate networks out there promoting heavily pin loop hack, and also some MO hacks as well. So it's, I think, mostly good. And the fact that the quality of fraud is improving, it means that anti-fraud is working. And we're now effectively in an arms race with the fraudsters.
Okay,
there's a lot more to go.
Thank you very much. I'd like to bring in David Rennie here. We've got two Davids to specify. David Rennie, if you can continue the discussion in the same vein, what's your take on it? Following on from Brian.
Well, I mean, from an identity perspective, the last 18 months, the lockdown that many countries have seen has driven the need for use of digital channels, and of course, it's therefore brought into sharp relief the need for a means of establishing trust in a digital transaction. And going back to your comment earlier at the beginning of the day, what's our score out of 10? When you bring things into the digital domain, you make things very transparent. And for a long time, people in the identity industry, such as myself, have been saying we need to address how you establish the trust in someone's identity in a digital channel, and now that's becoming very clear to many people. So things only get better once the problem has been understood. And I think the last 18 months have brought much greater clarity to that. And the great news is, the positive news is that there are a number of technologies. The technologies exist today and are mature that allow us to address the problems of identity in the digital channel. The problems that we need to solve are complicated problems around governance and how we interoperate with one another. But the basic technologies, in terms of biometric technologies, there's much greater confidence in biometric technologies. The privacy technologies to ensure that people understand how their data is being used, and tokenization technologies that minimize the need for data flows. All of those technologies are mature technologies, so I personally am very, very positive about the potential, now that many more people understand the problem, the potential for ecosystems and societies and governments to implement digital identity infrastructures and therefore really push back on fraud, because ultimately it will be the only way to address fraud, is to actually be able to establish privacy-centric, user-centric means of identifying people.
Thank you. Over to David Lotfi now. David, just like bring you on to continue in the same stream, your thoughts.
So I join Brian on several things he said. We are the fraudsters today. We need to understand that the fraudsters they are not specifically against carrier billing, and they are not specifically willing to make business on carrier billing. They are going where there is money and where they think it's easy to take the money. And how the fraudsters work, they work a lot with as software as a service platforms. They pay themselves through bitcoins, and they provide services to each others. And that's why the fraud has surged so high. It's because of the easiness of paying between fraudsters through bitcoins. So you have fraudsters that are specialized in developing malware, and you have fraudsters that are specialized in finding possibilities for those malwares. And what are the possibilities for the malwares that are installed on end-user device? It can be to shut down service and run DDoS attack or DDoS ransomware. So this is a kind of use of the malware. Another way is to create ad fraud. We discussed that when we were talking about traffic screener a bit sooner. And another one is by frauding on carrier billing. When the market push the technology, the investment that the fraudsters need to do to hack carrier billing are higher, and they prefer to put their investment in something easier. So that's a cat and mice race, but we are seeing indeed that the fraud that we are facing today are the rest of what the fraudsters cannot do through doing DDoS or ad fraud. They are trying DCB. So that's first part. Second part is about identity and all the interesting things that can be done for biometrics and so on. It faces a huge challenge, but I trust IDEMIA to be able to face them and to propose solution to the end user for that. But the challenges are to make sure it do not harm digital inclusion, because I have some customers, they are providing, for instance, very strong educational content for in Africa for feature phones. And that's really important that people in a lockdown era, that people can educate themselves with great content, can learn languages, can learn math, can learn from the best. And mobile payment, it's also about this. It's about inclusion. So the big challenges is to, as David said, to run a standard that could work with a lot of device and in a lot of situations. We are not talking about the US that much. We are talking about, and when we are talking about fraud, yes, why do we have so much regulation in the US? It's because when someone gets armed in the US, he knows that he can complain. But what happened in Southeast Asia, in Middle East, and in Africa?
It's the mindset. It goes back to the mindset thing that Alexis was talking about. If Christoforos would like to bring you in, when David L just started off, you were nodding furiously. I saw you there, going, "Yep, I agree." What's your take on things?
Well, I'll try with one stone to kill two birds and reply to both the questions that you asked lastly. So I believe that due to the pandemic, we do not have too many attacks, but because of the pandemic, there is a growth on the online transactions, and we see that a lot of people are not vigilant to what's going on. So working from house, you feel much more safe than being in a work environment. So apart from that, we have a lot of application providers that they've put out their application on a night just to capitalize on what's going on, and they have not done the right assessments or the threat modeling. So these left the customers vulnerable. Apart from this, the majority of the users were not security aware as well, so they did not have the right training. And if you couple that with the psychological factors analyzed beforehand and not being vigilant at home, it lets them more vulnerable to attacks. Some of these examples could be, for example, the authorized push payment app, or attacks that have to do with stolen or synthetic identity frauds in digital wallets and peer-to-peer payments, even the insider threat. I think for me, the key is, well, the whole grail is to build a security by design strategy. And you can achieve that by 6 main steps. The one is the security awareness by the users. The second one is the thorough security design and the architecture. The third one is the incorporation of security design into the product, especially in the whole of the product lifecycle through secure software development lifecycle, detailed threat modeling, in combination with the pen testing, of course, and the security assessments. The fourth one is the strong security-based cryptographic approach, so having cryptographic robustness rather than obscurity. To have transparency in the security controls employed and be proactively transparent. And lastly, to establish a culture of data privacy ethics, not only externally, but also internally in the organization.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you, Christoforos. Now, time is running down for us already. Can't believe time flies when we're all having a good time. So just really like to start wrapping this up. And I think the way to do that is just to ask each of you for a couple of quick wins this year from your perspective, all things being equal. You had full control over everything, you controlled everything. What for you would be a couple of real nice quick wins to make our world of payments more secure? Starting with you, John Bruner, over in the US.
No time to think about it, huh?
No time. No. It's the first one. It's always the hardest. Yeah.
Yeah. So look, I'm really banking on identity, services going into play. For the first time, we've got the ability to provide verification of brands and merchants that want to engage consumers. In the RCS space as it's emerging, in the messaging space, B2P messaging space. I believe RCS is going to be payments as well if it goes down the direction it should. And the verified callers. And so, creating that identity capability on the hundreds of thousands and millions of companies out there that want to be legitimate players in the market, and creating safety for the consumers that when they get a message with a link to click on, that it's a verified sender, it's not a fraudster. to me, is moving in a great direction in the U.S. The complexity is going to be there are a lot of players. And a good example of that is in RCS, where you've got, Joe's Barbershop going to a bot platform. The bot platform goes to a sub-aggregator. The sub-aggregator goes to a tier 1 aggregator. And so you've got a lot of players that are bringing, that throughput to market, and documenting who they all are and making sure no players get in the middle of it is probably the next big challenge.
Sorry about cutting you off, John, but time is against us.
I'm good.
No, but that's really good. We get that. Thank you very much. Brian, the same to you. So a couple of quick wins in your mind. What could we do?
I think one is the rollout of a decent anti-fraud system, and two is the rollout of a decent anti-fraud system. That's it, nice and quick.
That is very, very quick. Thank you. You bought me a few seconds back there. Appreciate that. That's all good. Thank you. Very, very clear. Very, very clear. Alexis, over to you for Sam Media.
Well, one is to implement a proper anti-fraud solution. No, seriously, but that together with carriers, together with payment providers, and that's I would like to extend an invitation to any carrier hearing or seeing this to talk and to set up a project, to talk, to share data, to work together on implementing a quality anti-fraud solution, so we can grow revenues together in a safe way that consumers trust.
Thank you, David Lotfi. To you, the same. Obviously, you're going to say an excellent anti-fraud solution, but when we say a quick win, just a very, very quick win.
Quick win, yeah, the quick win. Download the white paper of the MEF regarding anti-fraud. There is a lot of things to do there. We have to bring the awareness to everyone, and people and the stakeholders have to accept that fraud exists and to organize themselves against it by installing my solution, by installing ones of Brian, by putting measures, but accepting that it exists and to organize themselves in order to fight it.
Totally agree. You cannot bury your head in the sand and pretend it doesn't exist, or see it and run away going, no, DCB is bad. I agree, totally. David Rennie.
So James Crosby wrote a report for Gordon Brown in 2008, had the subtitle "Identity is the New Money." And it's a big topic to delve into right at the end, but I think for the industry to ponder the importance of identity is critical. And the great news is there are identity verification technologies and government standards that are available and are maturing in the market. So I think in terms of a quick win, the building identity into the end-to-end process is achievable and deliverable in the next year or two.
Well, okay, fantastic. Good to hear. And Christoforos, yourself.
Yeah.
To bring this to a close, closing remarks from yourself.
Sure, it will be a different approach for me. I believe that there is no silver bullet. Therefore, there is no perfect anti-fraud solution. For me, cybersecurity's goal should be the resilience on their systems. Therefore, it's a whole of a maturity journey. And we need to start early enough. We need to understand the risk posture. We need to understand what is at stake through threat modeling or whatever else needs to be done per business, and start this modeling, because the resilience is the one that can remain no matter what happens with the evolution of the attackers.
Thank you, Christoforos. So all that remains for me to do is to thank all my speakers today. Apologies for having to jump in and cut you short. I think we could have easily had 60 minutes plus, but we are sticking to a very tight schedule and ship. So my thanks to David Rennie from IDEMIA. Thank you very much. Brian, lovely seeing you again, MCP Insight. John Bruner, Aegis Mobile, Alexis Bartelds, Sam Media, David Lotfi, EVINA, and Christoforos Papachristou from CENSUS. Thank you all for joining me. Hope you enjoyed.
Well done. Thank you, James.
No problem. Catch you later. All the best.